promoting dialogue. It's May Day in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Porto Novo. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Mali's junta leader Colonel Assimi Goïta arrives in Burkina Faso today. The Gambia's National Security Council bill read in Parliament for the first time.
Honorable members, the bill has been read a fourth time. The next stage of the National Security Council Bill 2024 is appointed for Monday, 15th July 2024.
Two former presidents of Benin Republic arrive in Niamey to mediate the long-lasting diplomatic crisis between Benin and Niger. And mixed reactions trails President Bouakar's nomination of an executive director for the Office of War and Economic Crimes Court in Liberia.
The issue raised by them is so babyish. It's just legally unacceptable.
We don't know him for anything in transitional justice in Liberia. He knows nothing about international law.
I do not trust him today. I'm not trusting tomorrow.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Augustine Coley with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. Let's begin with Mali, as the country's junta leader Colonel Assimi Goïta is arriving in Burkina Faso today, Tuesday, as part of a strategic visit to his Burkinabe counterpart Ibrahim Traoré. Upon arriving in Burkina Faso, Goïta will hold discussions with Captain Traoré and use the opportunity to revisit discussions on the cooperative relations that exist between Mali and Burkina Faso. The fight against terrorism, socio-economic development, and the quest for total sovereignty of the two countries will also feature in the exchanges between the two heads of state. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have been facing terrorist attacks for several years. This meeting of the two heads of state of ISA member countries would also be an opportunity to strengthen the alliance for the benefit of the peoples of the three Sahelan states. Over to Benin Republic, where two former presidents, Nosiforo Soklo and Yayi Bone, arrived in Niamey as part of initiative to reconcile the diplomatic crisis which has existed between their country and Niger for several months. The two former Beninese heads of state arrived Monday evening at Jori Yamani International Airport and were welcomed by the Minister of State for the Interior, Brigadier General Mohamed Tomba. Nosiforo Soklo and Yaya Boni made no statement upon their arrival in Niamey. David Vincent has the details.
A press release recently published by the communications units of the two former presidents indicated that in view of the crisis between Niger and Benin, Nosiforo Soklo and Yayi Boni wished to meet with the Nigerian authorities, who indicated their agreement. The same source specified that during their stay, the two former heads of state will exchange with Nigerian officials at the highest summit in order to help restore cordial, fraternal and mutually beneficial relations between Niger and Benin. Since the coup d'etat of July 26 against President Mohamed Bazoum, relations between Niger and Benin have deteriorated. The Beninese authorities had implemented the decision of the ECOWAS Commission by closing their borders with neighboring Niger. When the regional organization decided to lift its sanctions against Niger, the Nigerian authorities refused to reopen their borders with Benin, accusing this country of hosting French military bases. Despite the denial by the Beninese authorities, Niamey has not changed its position. Tensions escalated when the Beninese police arrested 5 Nigerian agents sent to assist in the loading of Nigerian crude oil at the Beninese port of Semekoji. Niger stopped the shipment of its crude oil to Benin despite the release of the 5 agents, 3 of whom were tried and sentenced to 18 months in prison by the Beninese courts.
David Vincent reporting there. Away from Benin, the government of Côte d'Ivoire on Monday launched a national campaign against disinformation on social media ahead of the 2025 presidential election. Called the Online All Responsible for a Respectful and Secure Digital Environment, the campaign was officially launched by the Ivorian Prime Minister Robert Begre Mambe. This campaign is aimed at reducing the risk of falsehood and negative propaganda in an increasingly connected world, including the West African state. Details with H.A. Atisu.
The online All Responsible campaign aims to promote the fight against disinformation and protect citizens online. At the official launching ceremony on Monday, Ivorian Prime Minister Robert Begue Mambe said digital channels have revolutionized the way people communicate and interact, but also brought new challenges. He noted among these that disinformation constitutes an insidious threat that compromises the stability of societies and also weakens the foundations of democracy. The Ivorian Prime Minister declared that in addition to social values, this scourge threatens citizen sovereignty, destabilizes economies, and weakens their position on the international scene. He said that these factors led the government to take concrete measures, including the national campaign against disinformation to protect the Ivorian digital space. For his part, Amadou Coulibaly, the Minister of Communication, stressed that the campaign aims to educate the public about the responsible use of digital tools. According to Coulibaly, this will allow the citizens to write a new chapter in the use of the internet as a communication medium. The national campaign against disinformation on social media includes multimedia awareness and training aimed at giving citizens the skills necessary to identify false information. This initiative positions Côte d'Ivoire as the first African country to join the global network of countries working to protect the integrity of information.
H.A. Atisu fight that report. The Gambia's National Security Council bill was read in Parliament for the first time as lawmakers resumed normal session on Monday. Parliamentarians also approved the first ever code of conduct for the National Assembly members. Sankule Janko has more in this report.
Monday marked a significant session in the Gambia's parliament as lawmakers resumed to a full agenda. The highlight of the day was the first reading of the National Security Council bill. This bill aims to establish a framework for addressing national security issues, enhancing coordination among various security agencies, and ensuring the country's safety and stability. Fabakary Tombonjata is the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Gambia.
Honorable members, the bill has been read a fourth time. The next stage of the National Security Council Bill 2024 is appointed for Monday, 15th July 2024, for the person in charge of the bill to move a motion for the second reading in accordance with Order 66-2.
The bill's introduction is seen as a critical step in strengthening the nation's security apparatus with a view to standardizing the sector. In addition to the National Security Council Bill, Parliament witnessed the first reading of the Judicial Officers Bill, the Vetting Bill, among others. Parliament also approved Gambia's first ever code of conduct for parliamentarians. This landmark document aims to uphold the integrity and accountability of elected officials. Alhaji S. Dabo is the Vice Chairperson of the Ethics Committee of the Parliament.
Of a code of conduct for National Assembly members of the Gambia, once adopted today, will serve to regulate the conduct and behavior of members of the National Assembly, and to some extent, outside the National Assembly.
The Code of Conduct outlines ethical standards and behaviors expected from members of Parliament, promoting transparency, responsibility, and public trust. Key among the activities during this parliamentary session include the State of the Nation's address by President Barrow and the Parliamentary Committee report on the private member bill which seeks to repeal the law criminalizing female genital mutilation, FGM. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, here in Senegal, 2 of the 300 prisoners who benefited from the presidential pardon on the eve of Tabaski have been rearrested by Senegalese police. One of the 2, identified as Cho, is said to have murdered someone. According to sources, the convict took the life of a young fashion designer in the Dakar suburbs. Enraged residents were about to lynch the suspect when he was saved in time by the police, just in the nick of time. The second beneficiary of the presidential pardon is a Guinean national. In his case, reports say that instead of returning to his country following his release, Aba decided to return to his old behavior of thievery, but got unlucky again when he was caught in the middle of stealing in Senegal. He was also caught using Indian ham. Away from Senegal, a group of lawyers in Liberia has come in defense of one of their own, Consider Jonathan Massaquoi, who was recently nominated by President Joseph Boakai to spearhead the Office of War and Economic Crimes Court. So far, 76 CSOs under the banner Coalition for the Establishment of War and Economic Crimes Court in Liberia, including the human rights community, have rejected the decision, urging the president to withdraw the nomination. Here is Darlington Pogba with the rest of the story.
The human rights actors accuse the Councillor Masakwe of representing the legal interests of Madam Agnes Reeve Taylor and Savalonian national Jibril Masakwe, both of whom were on separate trials for their alleged involvements in the Liberian Civil War. Despite their criticisms, a veteran Liberian lawyer who once served as the law clerk of the Honorable Supreme Court of Liberia for over 8 years, Councillor Elijah Fokio, and another ranking lawyer, Councillor Amara Sharif, are among several lawyers who have come in defense of their fellow lawyer by describing the claims by the CSOs as baseless.
If they had raised issue of Councillor Masakwe being involved in the war himself, if they had raised issue of criminal activity that Councillor Masakwe had been involved in, then I could have given credence to whatever they are saying. But the issue raised by them is so babyish. It's just legally unacceptable.
And now only qualify him integrity. He's not a prosecutor. He is serving as administrative hierarchy to ensure successful prosecution.
Interestingly, former commissioners of the defunct Children Reconciliation Commission, Massa Washington and John Stewart, are backing the CSOs, describing the nominee as someone with zero credentials about human rights issues both locally and internationally.
We don't know him for anything in transitional justice in Liberia. He knows nothing about international law, international humanitarian law, nothing. He lacks the education, knowledge, and experience to be able to do this job.
Councillor Masakwe is conflicted, and that is a credibility issue. In the case of Jibril Masakwe was here killing people in Monrovia. So Jonathan Masakwe would be a wrong fit for the court.
50-year-old Peterson Sonja, a massacre survivor who doubles as the head of the Transitional Justice Working Group of Liberia and the Liberian Massacre Survivor Association, views the appointment as a slap in the face of the real victims of the conflict.
The men are against justice, the men are against victims and survivors in this country. So it's not going to work. I do not trust him today, I'm not trusting tomorrow.
For now, it remains unclear whether or not the Liberian leader will record the nomination of Councillor Masakwe, as the aggrieved human rights actors have vowed never to work with him. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Pogba in Monrovia.
Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has vowed that his administration will not relent until banditry, terrorism, and other insecurity issues are completely eradicated. He noted that the country has reached a turning point as the security forces' strategies are yielding results. The president made this statement at the Northwest Peace and Security Summit in Katsina State. Usma Omra reports.
President Tinubu, represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima, reiterated his administration's commitment to eliminating insecurity in Northwest region. He acknowledged the historical unity of northern Nigeria, rooted in shared culture and interests, and emphasized the need for collective action to address the region's security challenges. The president highlighted his administration's kinetic and non-kinetic interventions, including the Pulaku Resettlement Initiative, aimed at building a secure and peaceful region. In separate remarks, the governor of Katsina State, Umar Radda, emphasized the need for more collaboration with
channels to ensure timely response to threats. However, addressing banditry is not solely the responsibility of our security agencies. We must engage with local communities, traditional rulers, religious leaders to foster a culture of cooperation and trust.
While the Sultan of Sokoto, Abubakar Saad II, said security challenges in the region may take decades to eradicate if all stakeholders do not cooperate.
I would like to thank you and even other agencies, but I want to say no matter how much support you give us, if we are not ready and willing to end these criminal activities, we can't succeed. We will be the ones to work for this and end these problems if we so desire. Nobody will come from somewhere to work for us. Nobody will come from the moon to solve these problems. We must solve our problems.
The summit aims to profile solutions to insecurity and ensure a safe and peaceful region. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Away from Nigeria, the West Africa Network for Surveillance and Control is holding its 4th annual meeting in the Senegalese capital, Dakar. The 5-day event, which began on Monday, saw in attendance over 90 epidemiologists and public health practitioners representing 16 countries in the West African state. As Rose Samara Cates reports, WASON's main objective is to strengthen existing links in surveillance states within the region.
As outbreaks of Aedes-borne arboviruses such as dengue, Zika, and chikungunya continues to increase across Africa, establishing a strong public health entomology infrastructure has become crucial. The West African Aedes Surveillance Network, WASON, a non-profitable organization, aims to strengthen the capacity of countries within the sub-region to carry out surveillance and control arboviral diseases. Professor Samuel K. Dadzie, the chairperson of WASON, speaks on the significance of the event.
The whole idea of setting up the network is to support countries, especially in West Africa, to build their capacity on the control of arboviral diseases, specifically for us, concentrating on Aedes-borne diseases. We've seen a lot of increase in cases of dengue in many countries. So this meeting is very timely for us to meet and discuss the way forward that we can support countries to be able to mitigate the threat of these outbreaks.
But despite the strategies for curtailing the outbreak, it was highlighted that many countries are experiencing similar challenges in initiating, strengthening, and maintaining Aedes surveillance programs. Chabi Joseph, a consultant at PMI Evolve and an entomologist, speaks on this.
The country are somehow behind in terms of surveillance. Normally, when you talk about arboviral surveillance, we talk about yellow fever, dengue, and those things. So it became a little bit behind malaria, where people focus more in terms of malaria vector control. The funding in terms of Aedes surveillance is a little bit behind malaria surveillance. So we are trying to bring that up because we are seeing some new outbreak in many countries. Though there are other diseases like malaria that people are focused on, there are also the Aedes mosquito that needs also to be cared of. So we try to bring that on board with all the countries.
For Dr. Adetunji Bamidele Shadia, one of the trainees from Lagos State University, Nigeria, the event has been so far enlightening on arboviruses epidemiology in sub-Saharan Africa.
It has been an informative and very educative program. All what we've done, like the general public and as entomologists, what we know about mosquitoes, our scope of knowledge has been broadened and widened in the sense that we are getting to learn about new things that can equally make us mosquito-free and also reduce the infestation of mosquitoes in our various West African countries.
The Fourth West African Aedes Surveillance Network WASON meeting brought together over 90 participants from 19 different countries.
Rose Samara Cates with that report. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Mali's junta leader Colonel Assimi Goïta arrives in Burkina Faso today. The Gambia's National Security Council bill read in Parliament for the first time. Two former presidents of Benin Republic arrive in Niamey to mediate the long-lasting diplomatic crisis between Benin and Niger. Still ahead, Ghanaian President Akufo-Addo announces the imminent resumption of many infrastructural projects. We do have the press review, guest interview, and the sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, in what the government of Ghana believes is a pivotal move for the country's economic recovery, President Akufo-Addo has announced the imminent resumption of many installed infrastructure projects. Nana Akufo-Addo's comments comes barely 48 hours after the Minister of Finance, Dr. Amin Adam, made similar remarks in the UK. WADR's Nadia Titi reports.
Speaking at the Jubilee House, Ghana's seat of government, President Akufo-Addo announced that several stalled projects across Ghana will soon resume following successful debt restructuring negotiations. He highlighted the completion of domestic, external, bilateral and commercial bondholder debt restructuring, which collectively provided substantial financial reliefs and sets the stage for renewed infrastructural and development efforts.
Many of the projects stalled as a result of the debt in negotiations will now resume. The conclusions of the negotiations have been highly satisfactory and to some extent unprecedented in the history of country debt restructuring.
Nana Akufo-Addo further emphasized the significance of the domestic debt restructuring, which achieved a high participation rate of almost 95%.
Coupon rates were reduced from 21% to some 9% on average, and maturities were extended, providing the government much needed breathing space and putting the domestic debt to GDP ratio on a clear downward trend. Overall, 203 billion cedis have been exchanged. This has helped ease the massive near-term local debt service burden, which was more than 40% of our tax revenue.
These measures, according to the president, will pave way for the IMF's approval of Ghana's second review of the fund program, resulting in an additional $360 million in support. President Akufo-Addo commended the Ministry of Finance for their efforts in seeing through the processes to reach the final point. For WADR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's join Darlington Porkwari Monrovia for the newspaper review.
For today's edition of Press Review, we have the Daily Observer newspaper, the New Liberia newspaper, and the Inquirer newspaper. So those are the three newspapers on our desk for review, and we will begin the review process with the Daily Observer newspaper. Bwaka asks nursing appoints Dr. Conte to lead search for UF president. We see the photographs of President Joseph Yuma Bwaka and the board of trustee of the University of Liberia. NAFA DG denies corruption scandal, says no disbursement without World Bank approval. As the head of the National Fisheries and Aquaculture Authority, we will take a gist of this story. The Director General of the National Fisheries and Aquaculture Authority, Emma Glasgow, has denied corruption allegations surrounding the World Bank-funded Liberia Sustainable Management of Fisheries project. Madam Emma Glasgow denounced the claims as baseless, emphasizing that all disbursements from the World Bank-funded project have undergone rigorous review and approval process by the World Bank. We will leave a read this on the back page of the Daily Observer newspaper. Superintendent Norris discloses REST CBL that the Central Bank of Liberia authorities to provide full clarity on all financial transactions from August 10, 2021 to June 2024. From the Daily Observer newspaper, the New Liberia newspaper is next, attracting public confidence transparency as President Bwaka publishes declared assets. IMF delegation arrives, assesses extended credit facility on the back page of the New Liberia newspaper. Our last stop for today's edition is the Inquirer newspaper. Liberia returns to Tier 2 watch list on human trafficking. The United States Department 2024 Trafficking in Person report says Liberia's efforts to combat human trafficking have fallen short of international standards, leading to its downward trend to Tier 2 watch list. NAFA's DG Glasgow refused World Bank's fundings. That is how we love to conclude today's edition of Press Review. But before we go, these are the newspapers we actually followed on today's edition. We followed the Daily Observer newspaper, the New Liberia newspaper, and the Inquirer newspaper was our last stop. On that note, thank you so much for following, and bye-bye.
Thanks to Darlington Porkwa for the newspaper review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest this afternoon is Adama Dempster. He's the head of the National Human Rights Commission of Liberia. He speaks about the current unfolding regarding President Joseph Yuma Bwaka's nomination of Councillor Jonathan Masakwe as Executive Director of the Office of War and Economic Crimes Court.
He is representing two persons who have been indicted with related war crimes that have been prosecuted under universal jurisdiction. And so one of the persons has to do with the former president of Liberia, Charles Taylor's wife. And this is a woman who was with Charles Taylor throughout the civil wars. She was indicted by a UK court for act of torture. Though that case did not go forward, but he is a lawyer. In Liberia, those who were pursuing that case, including some human rights defenders, he, on behalf of this woman, have handed down a lawsuit in the tune of $15 million for defamation of character against human rights defenders. On the other aspect, there's a surveillance the indictee, Jibril Massaquoi, who was being prosecuted by the Finnish authority for war crimes and related crimes committed in Liberia, especially in Lofa County. He is the defense lawyer for that identical individual.
The establishment of such court has been one of the calls by you, the civil society people. Now that the president has appointed a qualified lawyer, how does this appointment or nomination undermine the effort to prosecute perpetrators of war crimes and ensure justice for the victims?
So our role, our work, our advocacy have been to see a court that will be impartial, fair, and transparent. That is what we advocated for, to address the atrocities that were committed during the civil war in Liberia, and then to end the culture of impunity. We applaud the President of the Republic of Liberia, the legislature, for having adhered to our long years of advocacy and campaign. And what we're saying here, we don't want a process that will be marked by any inconsistencies and then the questionable independent role or gap that has to do with the whole war crime process. We're saying openly that an overnight appointment that just came to the public glad could have been expedient in the process of even vetting, having a vetting committee that we have vetted to be able to identify and then pick a person who could come and serve in this position.
Adama Dempster is the head of the National Human Rights Commission of Liberia. Now, in the world of sports, the African Cup of Nations 2025 has been rescheduled by the Confederation of African Football to take place in Morocco from December 21, 2025, now to January 18, 2026. This decision comes after the announcement of the Club World Cup for the summer 2025. This will mark the third consecutive edition of the tournament to be postponed following the CHAN 2021 in Cameroon and the CHAN 2023 in Cote d'Ivoire. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and David Vincent for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. I am Augustine Cully. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM.